College. Joining us tonight is our Melbourne Philippine Consulate General, Liz Honey from Radio 3 Triple Z, and Matt Christie from Plenty Valley Radio. And of course, we have Melvin Mata and George Valdivia from Good Vibes Filipinas, Melton Community Radio. And we're very, very excited because tonight we have the Waterwell Project, which is an award-winning Australian not-for-profit health promotion charity founded in 2011. They are actually helping individuals and communities from migrant and refugee or asylum seeker backgrounds through health education. And the Water Wealth Project facilitates health education sessions in partnership with community organizations. And tonight, GAWAD Kalinga is very happy to welcome our doctors from the Waterwell Project. Beginning with, they are now going to introduce themselves. Bella.
Thank you so much, Marissa. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Bella. I'm a junior doctor based in Melbourne. I grew up in Canberra, but I've lived in Victoria for the last 7 or 8 years now. And another fun fact, I have visited the Philippines before, and I really enjoyed it.
And thanks again, Marissa. That's a great introduction. My name is Liz. I'm another doctor. I'm an emergency doctor, and I'm based in Hobart at the moment, but Melbourne is my home, and that's where I've come from. And I haven't been to the Philippines like Bella, but I have a lot of Filipino friends. So thank you for having us tonight.
Hi everyone, my name is Jess. I'm third doctor on this call. I work in Sydney in obstetrics and gynecology. I haven't had the pleasure of visiting the Philippines either, but would love to go in the future, and I'm very excited about our session tonight.
Lauren?
Hi, I didn't realise we'd be speaking, but I'm Lauren. I'm one of the health educators with the Waterwell Project, and it's great to be here tonight. I'm based in Melbourne, and I'll just be helping in the background while these three do your session with you.
And of course, Monica.
Hi, Marissa. Hi, everyone, for watching. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm also a health educator with the Waterwell Project, and I'm helping, like Lauren said, in the background tonight. So we've got lovely Bella, Jess, and Liz who will be running the show this evening, and looking forward to it. Thanks, guys.
Have we heard from Jessica? Yes, we have. Okay, yeah. Just a few rules. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to put them in our chat conversation. Let's refrain from asking questions until the presentation is finished. And if you want to ask the question in Tagalog, you may do so, and I will just translate it in English. We also have someone from the Philippine Times, which is the Philippine Australian newspaper. Rain, thank you for covering this. And I think someone from SBS Radio will be joining us later as well. So let's proceed then with the presentation.
All right, I'm happy to start. Bella, did you want to give a bit more of an introduction, or are you happy with Marissa's introduction?
That was a brilliant introduction. I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
I might just say quickly, thank you very much for having us. And as Marissa said, the Waterwell Project has a lot of different health volunteers, and we run different sessions. Tonight, we'll do our best to answer any questions you've got. We're not able to answer any personal health questions. So please, any broad questions you've got about COVID or the vaccines, but nothing specifically about you or your loved ones. Okay, so I'll start our presentation now. Okay, so we're going to talk firstly about COVID-19, just very quickly. So we're going to run through this really quickly because I know a lot of people already know these things. Getting tested for COVID is very important. We do it to protect our friends and our family, to try and stop the virus and We know that every test people get really helps us. There's lots of different reasons to get tested. We all know this, but if you have any symptoms, if you've been told that you need to by the Department of Health in wherever you live, and if you know someone who might be positive. Depending where you live, how you get tested is different. There's some drive-through centres, there's GP or health clinics, and there's a general number you can call. We all know that after you have a test, you have to stay inside, sadly, until you get the test results. This is just as important as getting the test in the first place. Everybody, especially in Melbourne, New South Wales, knows about face masks. We need to keep washing our hands as much as we can. We need to physical distance when we can. And that's about the basics of COVID, because we all know a lot about it already, okay? Now, I'm going to talk a bit about the vaccines. First, I'm going to ask Mel if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit of a video about how the vaccines are developed. I think that's really important for us to all know.
Developing a vaccine is a long road full of checkpoints, each phase designed to make sure it's both safe and effective. But with the whole world struggling to contain a pandemic and unprecedented amounts of funding available, the road to finding COVID-19 vaccines looked more like this. But first, let's take a look at the usual path. During preclinical trials, a vaccine is tested on animal hosts to determine whether they develop an immunity or antibodies to the disease. If these trials are successful, the candidate vaccine moves on to phase 1, during which it's given to a small number of healthy adults to ensure it's safe for humans. The results of each phase are reviewed by independent clinical observers who assess the research team's findings. Sometimes they'll pause the trials to check the results, always making sure the candidate vaccine is safe. The next phase involves testing a larger group of people to find out the appropriate dose, whether it stimulates an immune response, and, of course, if it's safe. Once the results have been checked by the independent observers, the candidate vaccine is given to thousands more people. This phase determines whether it is effective. If the answer is yes, it is ready for licensing and registration by the Therapeutic Goods Administration, or TGA. But because of the urgent need for COVID-19 vaccines, some of the phases were run in parallel, and research teams were able to submit requests for provisional TGA registration based on preliminary results. These authorisations were only given because the vaccines met strict safety and effectiveness criteria. But the road hasn't stopped there. Now that vaccines are in use, they are subjected to ongoing checks for safety and effectiveness. The race to find vaccines for COVID-19 was urgent, which is why some phases happened at the same time. But no one was cutting corners. Everyone was subject to the same checks and independent monitoring. So although we got COVID-19 vaccines faster, they're just as safe as any other vaccines.
All right.
Sorry,
Thank
Mel. We
Yeah.
heard the audio, but we didn't see the video.
Yeah.
Can we repeat?
Or otherwise I can just keep going. I don't mind, whatever's easiest. Maybe we keep going for the sake of time. So I hope everybody can still hear me. I'm going to keep going with the presentation. That was meant to have a video with it. I'm very sorry. The key part of that is that making the vaccines has been exactly how we normally make vaccines. There's just been a lot more money and funding because the whole world is trying to get the vaccine together. Okay. So in Australia, we have 3 vaccines at the moment, okay? And I think everybody knows this. Everybody knows quite a lot about the AstraZeneca and the Pfizer vaccine. So I'm not going to talk a lot about that tonight. We're happy to answer questions, but I'm going to move on a bit to Moderna because that's what people have been asking questions about. So the Moderna vaccine is very similar to the Pfizer vaccine, as in it's made in a similar way. Again, it's 2 doses, similar to both the Pfizer and the AstraZeneca. And at the moment, they're talking about them being between 4 and 6 weeks apart, the vaccines. They're hoping that maybe in 2022, this specific vaccine will cover different parts of COVID, like how we know the Delta version of COVID is different to the COVID we had last year. And in Australia, just this week, Moderna is starting to be offered to anyone who is above 12, similar to how Pfizer is. At the moment, it's just being offered through pharmacies, and it won't replace the main government initiative with AstraZeneca and Pfizer, but we might hear more and more about it. I've got some basic questions now that we've been asked quite a lot about the vaccines. Number 1, are the vaccines safe in pregnancy? So the Australian College of Obstetrics Gynecology, so the Women's College in Australia, along with the vaccine authorising group, approved vaccines for women who are pregnant and trying to become pregnant. That was in August this year. Both the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine have been decided they're safe if you're pregnant. If you're breastfeeding, you can have any of the vaccines, Pfizer, Moderna, or AstraZeneca. There's been proven there's no risk of increased miscarriage or loss of the baby or any chance of being infertile or not being able to have a baby. And there's a lot of talk that if you are pregnant, it is important to have the vaccine because if you get COVID, you can get a lot sicker from COVID, okay? Good, all right. Next one is, are the vaccines safe in children? So both Pfizer and Moderna vaccines have been tested and proven to be safe in children above the age of 12 at the moment. Studies in children always take a lot longer than studies in adults, and that's why the research has taken longer for it to be safer to give the vaccines in children. Initially, when we did some research, and it's still the case now, it looks like children do not get as sick from COVID as adults. However, we know from Melbourne and from New South Wales that children, even if they don't get very sick, they can still get COVID and spread COVID quite a lot. So that is why the government has now decided it is important to vaccinate children over 12. Just yesterday, Pfizer announced that they're trying to see if their vaccine can be approved in the United States of America for children aged 5 to 11, but this is just starting to happen and it's not the case in Australia yet. So in Australia, it's only children over the age of 12. Finally, lots of people are asking this, will we need to get a booster vaccine? And the answer is we don't really know yet, but probably there's a chance we might, but some countries are already doing boosters, so Israel, UK and USA, and they're hoping that will make our COVID immunity last a little bit longer. The problem with that is that the World Health Organization has asked that we don't give boosters yet until everybody in the world can have a COVID vaccine. And I think that's really important, and I'm sure from the Filipino society, you can appreciate this, that it's very important that everybody should get access to a vaccine before somebody gets to have an extra vaccine. So that is what the World Health Organization has asked. Just very quickly, I think we know this, are the vaccines free? They are free in Australia. Even if you don't have Medicare, you're allowed to get it at one of the big centres and you'll get a statement saying you've been vaccinated. Very quickly, before we move on to self-care from COVID, the key things are the vaccines are safe and they have been studied a lot. The vaccines work, but you need to have at least 2 doses, okay? And you need to have both doses. We know that people most at risk got the vaccine first, but now we are trying to get everybody to have the vaccine. The vaccine is free. We still need to try and keep washing our hands and social distancing. And that is really, really hard in big families and especially with children. So that is why we are trying to help vaccinate children now. And it's really important to speak to the doctor if you have any questions. We're going to move on now to talk about how to look after yourself during COVID. And we forgot to mention before, but I think it's important that COVID has affected a lot of different people across the world, in Australia, in the Philippines, lots of different places. And we know that certain people have suffered a lot with COVID. So we hope that you don't find this presentation distressing, and we're trying to look at ways to support us through this really challenging time. Okay? Great.
All right, guys. So thank you very much. We're now going to chat about self-care. So as Liz said, it's been an incredibly challenging time for all of us in different ways. I know at the moment, a lot of us are in lockdown, and we've been in lockdown for a really long time. And with that brings a huge amount of various challenges. So we're going to go through some things and some tips and tricks that might be able to help, with your self-care and mental health and all of that kind of stuff, because it is an incredibly challenging time. So to start off with, I think on our next slide, so this picture represents, I suppose, a few different really important things, and it's about closeness and connection. And that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges that we've had during lockdown, is that connection and that closeness that we have with our families and our friends can be really challenging to keep up, whether or not it's a physical distance. So our family might be overseas, or we're just not able to see them. And that can be really hard for our moods and for our mental health. You can see in, I was going to say, you can see in this picture that there's lots of different elements that all play into the one picture in the center, which is well-being. And I suppose that's what we're talking about today, and that there's lots of different elements to well-being, but it's really about pleasure and doing things that make us happy, achievement, and then that closeness and connection with our friends and family.
Absolutely. So there's heaps of practical things that you can do, things that you can add into your day-to-day lives to really promote improved mental well-being and physical well-being as well. One of our biggest tips is about structuring your day. So that's, setting goals for yourself, setting tasks for you to achieve, and that needs to be a mixture of obviously required things like groceries and laundry, but also things that you enjoy and things that bring happiness to your life.
So this next slide just shows a little to-do list, I suppose. And again, this is one of the things that Bella was just talking about, is that it can be really helpful when we're stuck in lockdown and we lose our normal routine to try and make our own routine, I suppose, and get things done so we do have that sense of achievement. So one really good way that I've found while I'm stuck at home and sort of can flounder around a little bit is to write down things that need to be done. So it can be as simple as doing the washing or doing some cooking or cleaning up, and then ticking them off as you go. And you really do find you can get some of that sense of achievement in just completing those everyday tasks. And that can be quite helpful for keeping our motivation and things like that going during lockdown, which is so challenging.
And staying social. So we've already said that really closeness and connection is the most important thing for our mental well-being. And obviously it's challenging when we can't see people in person. But there are so many ways that we can stay connected. And again, making this a feature in your day, scheduling time to talk with friends, reaching out to people that you may not have caught up with in a while, and utilizing technology. So like we're doing right now, Zoom is fantastic so that we can still see each other's faces, keep up to date with what everyone's up to, and check in with our friends and family as well, make sure that they're doing okay.
So this next one, guys, is so important, and it's all about physical activity and moving our bodies. And this can be in so many different forms. So it doesn't mean that we need to be running marathons around our suburb. It can be as simple as taking a nice light stroll outside or doing a home yoga class, for example. I know that there are lots of good yoga apps that we can use on our phones and on YouTube, and there's lots of free sort of exercise sessions that are available to us online. And just that act of moving our bodies, of getting our heart rate up a little bit and getting our blood pumping a bit, that really has such a huge impact on mental health. And that endorphin rush that people talk about, you know, is a great mood booster, and it can make you feel really good physically, but also feel really good mentally as well. So, you know, within everyone's COVID restrictions, and I know that can vary depending on where you are, you know, being able to get out for a walk, is incredibly important when possible.
Hobbies and projects. So this is a real source of joy and interest in the day. I can't think of a single person I know who hasn't tried something new or discovered a new hobby in this lockdown. Myself, I really enjoy doing really big 1,000, 2,000 piece puzzles. Got through a few of those recently. I know lots of people have gone into baking or gardening. There's so many different things that you can try and that you are able to do within your home to keep busy and keep your mind active as well.
So the next thing we're talking about, guys, is mindfulness. And this is, again, a really important one, and I suppose can look quite different to different people. But the term mindfulness really just refers to being able to calm our thoughts and clear our minds, you know, as well as we can, which can be incredibly difficult. So you can see in a picture here, the woman on the right is doing yoga and doing some meditation. So that can be a really nice way to just try and stay nice and focused and present in the moment. And again, I know I said before, but there are lots of good apps that are available and that can take you through things like guided meditations and stuff like that, which can be very good if you are feeling a little bit anxious or a little bit stressed, and a nice way to just be a little bit more present. And that takes us to our next slide, which is all about mindfulness and about, so it takes us to our next exercise. And essentially what we were going to talk about was just a little breathing exercise, which is a form of mindfulness and is just a nice way to calm our thoughts when they are racing really quickly, which is a very normal thing and, you know, something we all experience if we're a bit stressed. And essentially what we just wanted to tell you is that, you know, if you are feeling overwhelmed and stressed, a really simple, really nice thing to do can just be to try and stop, take some nice big deep breaths in and big deep breaths out through your mouth, and do that a few times. And it can be a great way to just recenter and relax, and a good, you know, practice of mindfulness.
So it's still really important to get enough sleep. I know it sounds counterintuitive that if you're at home all the time, you would struggle with sleep, but definitely lacking that structure in your day can mean not maintaining a regular bedtime, eating before bed, having too much activity before bed, all those sorts of things can disrupt our sleep and impact our mental health. So really important to keep those things in mind, as well as, of course, our diet. So we talk about healthy eating a lot in the context of physical health, but it's also so important for our mental well-being. And especially now when it's so tempting to snuggle up on the couch with comfort food all the time, a lot of sugar and chocolate and snacks, still keeping in mind that we get enough nutritious food and a big range of fresh fruit and veggies and all of those things.
So this next one is about quality family time. And obviously that can be really hard given the current situation, and completely acknowledge that sometimes our families, we're not able to spend quality physical time with them together because they're overseas or in a different area of the state or in the country. And that can be really, really challenging. So, you know, for anyone going through that, I certainly, you know, are thinking of all of you. I suppose there are some creative ways that we can try to, you know, still have those connections if we are physically not together. So as we were saying before, things like FaceTime and Zoom and all that kind of stuff. You can see in the pictures here, there's a family doing a yoga class together. So that can be a fun way to connect, and that can be in person or, you know, over Zoom or over FaceTime. And then if you are lucky enough to have your family close by, still doing activities like going for a picnic. I know a lot of people in Sydney right now are really keen on a picnic because that's all we can do. But spending that quality time together is still so important, even though we might be, you know, trapped in a house together all day. Spending that quality family time and making those connections and trying to make those memories within, you know, our COVID restrictions is very important.
Yeah, so there's lots of things that we can all be doing, but of course it's worth acknowledging that in these times it's really natural to be more stressed, anxious, even sad, angry, and sometimes as much as we can do these things to support our well-being, that might not be enough, and it might be that we need some additional help from a health professional or a mental health service, and that doesn't mean that you're weak or you've failed to look after yourself. It's a normal part of life, and there are so many services and supports available if you reach out.
Okay, so we thought we would share some different activities or ideas for things that we can do to stay happy and busy during lockdown. So the first one there is giving someone a surprise call. So this is a lovely idea. It doesn't have to be, you know, a family member, or it can be anyone you want, really. Friend, family, check in and say hi. And it can be really nice, you know, a nice way to brighten someone's day when they weren't expecting it. The second point here is try something new. So we were talking about all the different lockdown hobbies that people have started. I've been doing a bit of painting, which I'm not very good at, but, you know, is very relaxing and very nice. I know a lot of my friends are getting into gardening, and there are lots of hobbies, and, you know, we can learn different languages and instruments and all of that kind of stuff. So there's lots of potential things out there. And I think learning something new is a really good way to stay motivated. And then the last one is to choose one daily commitment. So I suppose this is, you know, referring to setting goals and sort of setting achievable goals that we can get through during the day, and feeling that sense of achievement and sense of pride when it's done. I know one thing I like to do at the end of my day is to either, you know, talk about with my partner or my family, or write down something that I'm grateful for from that day. And it's a very nice way just to try and focus on the positives. And even during a really crappy day that's had lots of challenges, you know, pick something to be quite grateful for. And that helps me have a positive mindset.
So as I was saying before, there are lots of services out there. There's a few situations in which we would definitely encourage you to put up your hand and say, I think I'm struggling and I think I need some extra help. If you're getting really overwhelmed with feelings of sadness or anxiety, where you can't get through your day-to-day activities, you're not enjoying things that you used to enjoy, or if you're having any really dark thoughts like self-harm or life's not worth living, you can't go on, really important to let someone know. And if you're not comfortable going to your doctor in the first instance, reaching out to a trusted family member or friend who might be able to help you.
So we've just got some links here and some contact numbers for some good resources that are available for people that feel like they may be struggling with their mental well-being and their mental health and that they do need a little bit more help. So we can send those through and we'll make sure that they are available to everyone. And, you know, as we were saying, there are always resources out there. And if you feel like you really need help, things like Lifeline, which is 24/7 and, you know, has interpreter services as well, is always available. So we'll make sure that you guys have those.
Thank you so much, everyone. So I think we can open the floor to questions now.
Thank you, ladies. We've got a few questions already in the chat group, and I've got a few more questions in our website. The first question is, because we have two OB-GYNs here, you did mention in your presentation that the vaccines will not have an effect on those wanting to get pregnant. Is that correct? On fertility?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But what about those who are already pregnant? You said it's safe for the mother. Is it also safe on the fetus? Like, depending on what trimester they are, could there be an effect on the developmental growth of the fetus?
Yeah, great question. So from what we understand about the vaccine and from the ample data that we have from pregnant women who've received the vaccines in other countries, particularly the US and the UK, that it has had no effect on the development of the baby in any stage of pregnancy. And in addition to that, we know that the protection from the vaccine, the antibodies, do transfer to the baby. So you're protecting not only yourself, but your baby when they're born will be protected as well, which is so important to know.
And another question from our women. Some of those who got vaccinated have noticed and experienced changes in their menstrual cycle. Is there a link? Is that linked to the vaccine or?
Sure. So there's no link that has been identified in studies. Some of the discussion that we've had around this is obviously menstrual cycles can be affected by a huge number of things, and many women experience irregular cycles for a variety of reasons. And with such huge numbers of people getting the vaccine, there are always going to be these coincidences and things that might seem to be linked that not necessarily are, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Now, you said that...
Sorry, Marissa, could I just something
Yes.
really quickly about pregnant women and the effect for the fetus? I think a super important thing to remember is that if people get sick from COVID, they have a lot of problems with low oxygen, and that's probably the highest risk to the fetus that could happen. So we're trying our best to make sure that especially everybody, but especially pregnant women, don't get sick from COVID, and we know the vaccine is the best way to prevent that. So I think that's a really important thing to think about, that the effects of having COVID can be very severe for anybody, but especially if you're pregnant or already sick.
I think, one other thing just to add to that as well is from what, we've been seeing in our hospital, is that when pregnant women, absolutely right, as Liz said, do get sick, they get very sick. And it often means that we need to deliver their babies quite early to give them a chance to recover. And, the effects of having a baby that's unfortunately needs to be delivered earlier than when it would normally be, a lot more severe than any effects, that we might see from a COVID vaccine. So I think that's something to keep in mind as well.
Thanks for that, ladies. Going to the kids now. We are able to vaccinate 5-year-old to primary school age children. But how do we protect the 1-year-old to the 4-year-olds? Because we haven't allowed vaccination for them yet. We've got a few grandmothers here with that age of babies, 1 to 4 years old. How do we protect them if they're not going to be vaccinated yet?
So I suppose that's an excellent question. And, the standard hygiene practices that we were talking about at the start of the presentation. So things like hand washing and good hand hygiene, and, those fundamental things are the best way to protect children in that age bracket, just because we don't know if those vaccines are safe for them yet. So we can't, it's not advised to vaccinate kids of that age. But, those really, fundamental things of staying nice and clean and hygienic. So washing hands before you eat and after going to the bathroom and, all of that kind of stuff. And then if kids do get sick, really important to keep them at home and not sending them off to preschool or childcare or anything like that if they do have any symptoms like a runny nose or a cough or anything like that.
And I suppose I just have to correct you a little bit, Marissa. Unfortunately, in Australia, we only vaccinating kids above 12 at the moment, not above 5. Okay, so in the US, they're looking at for 5, but for now it's just 12. So yeah, there's a big portion of the population that can't have a vaccine yet. And so we really rely on the rest of us to have the vaccine and to practice really good hygiene to try and stop the spread. So that's why the government's looking at making sure, teachers get vaccinated and healthcare workers get vaccinated. So the chance of spreading the infection for people that can't get vaccinated is less.
Thanks for that. The other question is, how can we persuade our friends and family members who are opposed to vaccinations? I mean, there are some anti-vaxxers out there. How can we persuade them to change their mind?
That's a great question and a really hard question. There's so much misinformation out there. So, good on you guys for seeking out, reliable, medical advice. It's really good. I think that the best thing that you can do is in conversations with people is just be open-minded and listen to people's concerns. I think that one of the biggest things I found with people who are hesitant about vaccines is they're very defensive of that position. And it's really natural to be scared or worried about things that are new and we don't know about. And so just hearing what it is that's worrying them and acknowledging that's okay is a really big step. If you're not a health professional, it's not your job to sort of convince someone or tell someone the science, but urging them to have a chat with their own doctor, their GP, or going to the vaccination clinic where a doctor can address their questions and talk them through it, I think is the best thing that you can do, and good on you.
Okay, I'm going to ask.
That's really important, Bella, because it's not our job as the friend or the family of someone to convince them something. People have their own opinion, and that's allowed everywhere, especially in Australia. Okay, so people you should encourage them to make sure they're making informed decisions with good information from their doctor, okay? But it's not your job to make someone get vaccinated, and you shouldn't be losing good friends and family for that reason.
Okay, I'm going to make it a little bit more interactive. We have questions from Liz, from George, and Kat. So I'll get you to ask your questions directly to the doctors. Liz, would you like to start?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to join this forum, by the way. My question is it safe for elderly to be vaccinated? Because I come across a few of them, and they're worried about, because they're taking some tablets, medication for a long time, and especially with AstraZeneca, and with the media and all that, you know, they watch and sort of like they're really stressed. So that's one of the reasons that they're sort of like not having a vaccination, because of the medications they're currently taking. So I just gave you some examples. Some of them are taking diabetic and blood pressure tablets.
Yeah, thank you, Liz, so much. That is a wonderful question, and I think one that I've heard multiple times, and I think really important to address. And elderly are obviously one of the main priority groups for vaccination, because they are so vulnerable. And for the reason you just said, because they often have some other diseases, things like diabetes and other issues that make them more vulnerable to getting sick. Everything that we've seen about the vaccination so far, and all the studies that have been done, have shown that it is completely safe to take in the vast majority of cases. While, you know, as we said at the start, we can't give individualized, personalized advice. And if someone is worried, I'd highly recommend they speak to their GP or to speak to a doctor. But I think it's important to know that in the vast majority of cases, it's considered perfectly safe. And it's also, you know, I suppose a caveat to that is that it's highly encouraged, because if the elderly are to get COVID, similar to pregnant women, I suppose, in that they're a vulnerable population and they can get really, really sick really quickly. So, you know, the overwhelming advice is that, yes, we would highly recommend it.
Okay, thank you.
And actually, I think lots of the studies have included people from all different types, but diabetes and high blood pressure, they're really common conditions for people to have. So the studies from the US and the UK, they have like 40,000 people. So in that, there's definitely people that have high blood pressure or have diabetes and have had the vaccine and have been safe. So that's how we know that it's safe for people with these common conditions.
Okay, thank you, guys. Thank you.
You're
Sorry,
just on mute.
I think we're muted.
You're mute, Marisa.
Sorry. Thank you, Liz. George, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving this opportunity. My question is, like, with 5 more weeks, I think, of extended lockdown, now for the elderly people, which we have in a few, like a big number of them in the Filipino community, who are at risk of isolation, do you have any suggestions, like, you know, creative ways how they can remain engaged and at the same time active, get involved?
Yeah, totally. Thank you, George. Great question. I think that, you know, a lot of the things that we talked about tonight in terms of things to keep you active at home apply to everyone, but it's especially hard being an elderly person on your own, of course. I think that, you know, and utilizing technology can be harder when you're an older person as well. So I would hope that, especially in a wonderful community like this, that those people would have family and community that they could reach out to and get assistance with connecting with their family online, with even having meals delivered to them, other supplies delivered to them if that's needed, and support to get to medical appointments things like that.
I think as well, the question's really good from a creativity point of view, George, because, you know, I'm not sure what it's like, but for most people, if you're locked down at home, you don't have a lot of things happening. So when people say, oh, what have you been doing? It's like, oh, the same as I did yesterday, you know. So I think it's good to think of other things you can do with your family. So I know with my family, sometimes we get like the quiz from the newspaper, or I'm sure there must be a lot of Filipino examples of that, like different music or things, and we do it together. So one person reads the question from the quiz, and then everybody else has to answer, which is something we would normally do if we were in person. But because we can't be in person, we think of other ways. So I know not everybody has that access, but nobody's expecting you to have something interesting to say every day when the same thing is happening every day. But good to think of other ways that you could engage your family. So quizzes or trivia or music or dancing. Some different people find enjoyment from different things, but I have really found the kind of trivia and quiz, it means that, you know, you can share experiences and have a laugh without it being too serious.
You're okay with that, George?
Yes, thank you very much for that one.
Thank you, George. We'll get back to Liz.
I think Liz maybe has a suggestion, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it me? Is it me? Yeah. Okay. My suggestion, what I did with my mom, because she lives on her own, is that she used to love crochet. So she used to do crochet for tables, or the pillowcases and all that. So what I did, she did some for me a few months ago, and I just made up a story that I said that some of my friends really like her crochet, so some wants to order to make, you know, for a table. So I know how long it would take her. So something like that, maybe what they used to do before, maybe suggestions. So I keep my mom busy that way. And I sort of like keep in touch with her, like how many have you done and all that. And that probably is not good for her eyes, but it keeps her busy, and she enjoyed crochet. So I thought I'll just share that with you guys, with, you know, with elderly and what they like to do, or even some gardening or something. That's it.
I think that's a great example. Thank you, Liz. And I think it's about, like we said, having a purpose. So if you've said to her, oh, my friend really wants a crocheted tablecloth, then she would love to do that for you and your friend, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So
From Sarah Barcelona. Sarah, would you like to put your video on, or would you like me to just ask the question in your behalf? I think I'll ask the question in her behalf. Do we develop natural immunity if we got COVID? If yes, for how long? So when you have COVID, when you already have COVID, is it still necessary for you to get the vaccine because you already got it? Who can answer that?
Yeah, good question. There's a complicated long answer, but the short answer is that no, having COVID doesn't protect you or give you immunity, certainly not in the long term. And in general, it's still a very, very good idea to get vaccinated after you've recovered and spoken about it with your doctor. Unfortunately, we've seen that you can get reinfected with COVID. So it's to keep in mind.
I think also, oh, sorry, you go, Jess.
Sorry, Liz, we're probably saying the same thing. Unfortunately, with viruses, the nature of viruses is that they can change over time. And that's sort of what we've seen with COVID, unfortunately, this year. So you get something called a Delta strain, for example, and it's the same virus, but it's a different form. And it means that if you maybe had immunity or you had the earlier form of COVID, you can still get, unfortunately, this mutated form. And that's why we're really encouraging everyone to get vaccinated to provide a broader sort of, range of immunity, because unfortunately viruses can change a little bit over time, particularly when they're infecting large groups of people like COVID.
Thank you. And from Janet, how can we handle those who have trypanophobia and how can they get the vaccine without any trouble? Well, maybe explain to us first what trypanophobia means.
I was just looking it up. I didn't know myself, but now I know. It means fear of needles. Is that right? Yeah. There is a lot about this on when you look on Google about people being afraid of needles. It is difficult, okay, because you know for the immunization, for the vaccine, you need to have a needle. That's how we give the vaccine. But I suppose it's a little needle, and there are some distraction techniques that we use for children, for example. So sometimes you can put ice on the skin, and then you cannot feel it as much. And sometimes we can put distraction somewhere else on the skin. But obviously that's not possible at the big clinics because they're very busy. So I think if this is you, then probably need to go see the GP doctor to talk a bit about it and how to best make sure you can have some little distraction from having the injection, because at the moment we don't have another option to get a safe vaccination for everybody. Good question, though.
We'll give them lollipops, Liz. My grandchildren are given lollipops every time they get their vaccination.
I don't think adults are as gullible as kids, Melissa, sadly.
True. Another question about mental health. Obviously, with lockdown, we have a lot of new mothers. So it's bad enough that you get postpartum depression, but especially in lockdown. What would be your advice to our new moms who are, well, giving birth during lockdown and maybe feeling more isolated and more vulnerable to depression?
I think that's a great question. And it's so hard. It's an incredibly hard time for everyone, but particularly for that group. I know that at our hospital, we're doing online mothers groups, which has been working really well. So I would highly encourage new mothers to have a look in their local community and see if anything like that exists. There are lots of groups that are starting over Zoom and Skype and stuff like that, just so these mums can connect with other new mums. But I think it's incredibly difficult for them. I know that there are lots of groups on Instagram as well. There are, lots of very popular pages that people are following, and they sort of make daily posts and updates and things like that. And it's quite a nice way to link in. But yeah, I think it's incredibly challenging for sure.
Yeah, it is. And I would just add that, because Marissa, you mentioned postpartum depression. Like any depression, but particularly in that period when emotions are running high, things can deteriorate really quickly, and you can be really struggling. And that doesn't mean that you're a bad mother. Okay, it's such a hard time, and it's a new thing that you're getting used to, and it's okay to reach out and get some help with that. Really important. Yeah.
We have a service in New South Wales. I'm not sure. I think it extends to all of Australia. It's called Gidget House, and they work with women with postpartum anxiety and depression. And they're doing a lot of work that's specific to COVID at the moment. And they've got wonderful resources on their website and on their social media pages dealing with this exact issue. So, I would encourage those women, if they wanted to have a look, Gidget House is an excellent resource.
And now another mental health question. Our teenagers are also affected because they can't socialize. And some of them have a tendency to be depressed, and some have suicidal tendencies. So what would you advise the parents of teenagers who are exhibiting suicidal tendencies?
So really important question. And of course, you're right, teenagers have really been hit hard by this in such a formative time in their lives, and huge effects on their education, of course, as well as the social aspects. So I guess the first thing I would say is just being connected with your teenagers, spending time with them, and knowing the warning signs. So it sounds like in this case, you know, you're noticing a change, you're concerned about your teenager. That's really the first step. You know, that as we've already touched on, there's heaps of resources available. There are teen-specific helplines and online resources as well. You know, I think the big thing with teenagers is that they can really feel misunderstood and like nobody else really gets what they're going through. So just opening a frank and open dialogue with them and talking about how they might be feeling and acknowledging their feelings can go a long way.
I think as well with teenagers, it's really important to focus on the routine, like we spoke about in the talk, because everybody knows as teenagers go through teenagehood, they just would like to sleep in really late and stay up late and, you know, maybe talk to their friends on the phone, which is positive things to do, but still to try and keep some normal balance of time frame so that they're trying to attend school and trying to still do some exercise, things that they would normally do if they weren't locked down. Because I think otherwise it can be quite tricky if the routine is not kept for any of us, but especially in teenagehood.
Thank you. There is a question from Leanne. If the pregnant mother gets COVID, will the child be COVID positive as well, whether in the womb or after it's born? Is that carried to the child when the mother becomes COVID positive?
Yeah, good question. It definitely can be. It doesn't in all cases, but babies can definitely become infected either in utero when they're being born or afterwards. Important to note that that doesn't mean that babies are being separated from their mothers when they're COVID positive, because that early bonding time, establishing breastfeeding, all of those things are so important that they remain a priority. Okay, reassuringly, in most cases, whilst we've already said that for pregnant mothers, COVID can be a very serious illness, in the majority of cases, babies are not severely affected, but of course they still can be.
And from one of our volunteers, Krisa, when she got the jab, the nurse told her not to drink Panadol, but take Nurofen instead. Is there a reason why it's preferred to have Nurofen instead of Panadol?
I just read this question. I'd be curious to get your points, Bella, in this, but no, I actually haven't heard this. So, I mean, having Panadol has no impact on your body's ability to make immune cells, which is essentially what you're doing. And we are encouraging everyone to have Panadol and Nurofen as needed after their vaccine. I know I certainly did. So no, that's not something that I'm aware of. And it's certainly, you know, from an immune like a point of view, Panadol and Nurofen shouldn't affect that at all. It just helps with the side effects, the mild side effects that some people get.
Thank you, Jessica. And I'm just conscious of the time. So one last question. There have been a few childcare facilities that have been tier 1 exposure sites. Would you say that it's safe to put the children in childcare at this point because of the Delta variant going around and we haven't reached 80% of the vaccination rate? Is it best that they are kept at home instead of, you know, the childcare if someone can look after them?
It's an impossible question, isn't it, Marissa? I think it's a really important thing to think about, but I think for everybody, it's an individual choice. And maybe not even choice. You know, if you are both working and you're both essential workers and you need to work, then you need to send your child to childcare. That's a no-brainer, really. In terms of, is it safe? The government wouldn't be opening things up if it wasn't safe. They're being very careful about that. That's why we're getting really strict information about what's acceptable and not. We know that if kids do get COVID, we know that in general, they're not getting as sick. So it is still safe to send your child if you need to. And for a lot of people, that's the only possible thing to do. And, you know, there's risks, there's benefits of a child going to childcare as well in terms of their development and their growth. So there's risks and benefits with everything. But I think we would say it's individual depending on what's happening for each person. But in general, yes, it is safe, unless obviously it's a tier 1 site and the government's told you not to go. That's a different situation. But I think to follow the government's advice, and that if you want to send your child to childcare and you need to, then you have to. I'm not sure if Bella and Jess have any other opinions on that.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think you answered it perfectly, is that there's no right or wrong answer. And I think it's so important to remember that each family has their own set of circumstances, and we can't pass any judgment to anyone, because we all have different circumstances, and you just decide what's right for you. Yeah.
Well, our kids are very lucky, Liz and Patsy, because we're looking after our grandchildren. So I'm sure others can have that, find someone to care to if need be. There's one last question, if you don't mind. Is it true that a blood type O person has a natural immunity to the COVID?
Absolutely not. No.
There's not. Okay.
No truth in that whatsoever.
No, I've never heard that. And I've just seen that somebody else has written a question about what is the best medicine for COVID. Unfortunately, we don't really have any medicines at the moment that are very good for treating COVID. So the best thing we can do is to try and prevent COVID.
True. Prevention is better than curing.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, that's it for tonight. Someone wants to know if the Waterwell Project or you ladies can be invited to speak to the elderly. George, is that what you wanted to ask? Can they be invited to speak to the elderly group? I think you're always welcome to be invited, yeah?
Very much so, yes. We would definitely, we have hundreds of volunteers actually, and we're running sessions all the time for all sorts of groups, and we welcome any interest from any organisation that would like to partner with us. Yeah.
But I have a small problem, because I had a quick look on your website. You would be like, if a organization or a group is supporting, like, coming from the migrant, asylum, that thing. But because I am working for a non-for-profit organization, we support people with disabilities. I'm not so sure if this is within your scope.
Yeah, I would urge you probably just to inquire with the website anyway, and the team can have a chat to you about whether it's appropriate. Yeah.
If it's appropriate, can I request the same team? You're just amazing.
I've just put, thank you to one of our health educators. They've just put into the chat an email that you can email if you like. So like Bella said, all of the sessions are organised centrally, and then whichever volunteers are free can do the session. But I think at the moment, George, the organisation is running a lot of sessions for different community groups. So I really urge you to contact that email, and I'm sure they'll be able to find a way to help run the session.
I will do that. Thank you very much.
Right.
And ladies, would you be open to a radio interview as well? Because we've got a few, we have Radio 3ZZZ, Plenty Valley Radio, and Good Vibes Filipinas. Would you be open to being superstars on the radio?
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
I'll just coordinate. Just let me know, guys, and I'll coordinate the interviews for you. And also with the Philippine Times, if they would like a direct interview with you, I'll connect you to them. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you very much to our wonderful doctors from the Waterwell Project. It's been very educational and enlightening as well. Would you like to say final words before we say goodbye? Your parting words.
Just thank you so much for having us. We really, you know, enjoy doing this and you know, bringing this to various groups. And on the topic of well-being, it's obviously great for us to have these kinds of things to keep us active and connected. So thank you all.
And I suppose if anyone is still on the call, we've just put a survey in the chat. So if you had a moment to do that, that would be great. And yeah, just second what Bella said. Thank you for having us. We get a lot of enjoyment as well. And everybody to keep looking after themselves and look after their friends. I think that's the really important thing. So even if you don't want to, keep calling your friends and keep reaching out to the other people in your society, even as lockdown continues for forever.
And then, and that there is an end in sight.
Yeah, hopefully.
we won't be doing this forever.
Seems like
okay. And there is a survey that they're requesting us to just fill out. It is in the chat, but we will also post it on the GAWAD Kalinga page. And also, just to let you know, we are also, GAWAD Kalinga is also accepting peer-to-peer mental health counseling. We are not psychologists, but we can refer you to those links and those associations that can help. Also, we are helping those who are in Tier 1 or currently in quarantine. May we ask our radio producers and commentators to please announce that if they need food, philo food, adobo mat, yes, we can bring them the adobo and the dried fish if that's what they want. And if they're too far away to be reached, Tita Patsy is the one in charge of sending the Coles Meyer voucher. So we are here to help. Just please spread the word, and we are happy to be of help. I'll just say my final words in our language, doctors, if you don't mind. Maraming salamat po sa suporta ninyo sa GAWAD Kalinga. Thank you very much for your support sa GAWAD Kalinga. At sana, because we have our Philippine Consulate General staff here, maraming salamat din sa pagsuporta nyo. Thank you. In behalf of GAWAD Kalinga, thank you, Estelle. Please give our thanks also to the Congen and attorney, our deputy Congen. Yeah, and if you've got any further questions, don't hesitate to give it to us and we'll pass it on. Have a good evening, everyone. Don't forget to vaccinate. Stay safe, stay well, and stay beautiful. Good evening, Melbourne. Good night.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, all doctors.
Thank you, doctors.
Doctors. All young and beautiful doctors.